Hi friends! I promised you guys a Q&A today. I did not actually get any writing questions or questions for writers on my socials, but my husband gave me a really good idea. Welcome to Chat GPT asks writers questions, and I do my best to answer them. So I'm going to ask Chat GPT for 5 writing questions, and we're going to see what the system wants to know from writers, I guess. Hopefully it'll ask some helpful things so that you guys can get some valuable writing advice. Sure! Here are 5 thought-provoking questions for writers. What part of your writing process do you find the most challenging, and how do you overcome it? Oh, that's interesting. So for me right now, I actually find motivation to be the most challenging part of the process. And I want to write and I want my work to be finished, but I have in the past just felt so overwhelmed by the idea of writing and taking all of these thoughts and putting them onto paper, especially writing my first draft of the fantasy fairy tale retelling recently. And so something that I found that works for me personally for that though is setting up a structure and honoring the structure and the schedule. For me, it's a schedule, but I think for some people it might look a little bit different. I know my mom works better with to-do lists rather than schedules. I think because she finds schedules stressful, but to-do lists just kind of give her an awareness of what needs to be done. But for me, setting up a schedule and then also shortening my writing sessions. And so now instead of having 2 really long ones or 2 or 3 really long ones during the week, I have 5 shorter ones. So an hour and a half, 2 hours maximum throughout the week. That way I don't feel overwhelmed and I don't feel pressured to I have to finish this chapter in the 3 hours that I've allotted myself today. It's just a short time. I'm gonna get as much as I get done, and I've actually found myself more productive in that sense. I guess setting up a structured schedule, but allowing myself more freedom to just do the writing, accomplish what I accomplish in the time that I've allowed for myself has been what's worked best for me. Having more motivation. When I'm doing writing weeks, I try to write at the same time every day, and so then it's a habit rather than writing is specifically for these 3 days and I have to get as many words as I can in those sessions. That just didn't work for me. How do you develop and maintain a unique voice in your writing? Wow, ChatGPT is really coming at it with the good questions today. I've never really thought about that. I've been told a lot that I have a unique writing voice, but I've never really thought about how I do it. I guess it just comes naturally. No, I try to stay away from this is what this character should say in this moment. I try not to limit myself oh, well, this is fantasy, so the characters are going to talk really flowery or more serious, or it's contemporary, so I have to make sure it's I don't know, realistic. I guess I want to write the way that other people talk, but it's I think that I can get so caught up in that it's I end up losing my unique voice. Either sounds like everybody else or it just doesn't sound good. So I just think about what would I say in that circumstance? What does this scene look like to me? And how can I put that into words? And that is so much harder than I just made it sound. And I pray. That's actually... I do that before every writing session. That is the most important part, is letting a God guide the voice. It comes out very authentic and personal to me when I do that, and I find that actually easier to do, and it feels less wooden or comparable to other people's writing voices. When facing writer's block, what strategies do you use to get your creativity flowing again? Well, I think the card is over here. I actually have a whole video about that, but in brief summary, I pray before I write, set up a schedule. Sometimes you do really need to take a break, have a snack, take a walk, go do something fun with your friends. I like to spend time with my husband and my cat. I don't remember who said it originally, but it's been a piece of advice that's passed around a lot. It's write 80% during your writing sessions and then leave 20% of what you know you want to write that day for the next day, so you know exactly where you're going to start the next day, and so that kind of sets you up to have momentum every time. I've been doing that recently and I found that really helpful. What else do I do? I know I've talked about this before, but consuming content that is either the same or different. And I know that there's kind of the only 2 options, but if I am kind of at a loss for what I can do with the story and the elements that I've been given, then I try to consume content that's similar to, see what it's already been done and kind of explore what can I bring to the table or what can I do with what's already been done, because that's what we're doing at this point, is we're you're creating new things, but it's always going to be derivative or grown from what's already been done. And I think that that's actually really cool because it's like it's a continuous conversation. I have to listen to other voices in the conversation to see how I can participate in the conversation, is my view on it. But if I'm like just kind of like writing myself into a hole, or I'm just like really stuck in the weeds, or just like hyper focused on things, then I'll watch or read something that's different just to kind of like get myself out of that space. What role does research play in your writing, and how do you balance accuracy with storytelling? Okay. Wow. That's a big question. Okay, so research, I have found, is very important. And I think that this is true of any genre. You need to do some form of research. And the research could just be personal experience. If you're, sticking to writing what you know. I know that some people do that, but it's like you are writing about real things no matter what genre it is. So I write fiction primarily. So, but you are writing about real things. Like if you are writing a fantasy story where a bunch of characters go to war and there's a lot of fallout from that and stuff like that, you're dealing with strategy, you're dealing with empires. Usually you're going to be ended up dealing with like trauma and PTSD, and so you need to have some level of information about those things, in my opinion, to write them effectively, write them believably for the reader, but also write them in a respectful manner for the people who have experienced what you're writing about. And it's the same if like you're writing a romantic contemporary. Romance is something that is fueled by basic needs. There's a psychological and emotional aspect to it, so I think you need to have at least some knowledge of how all of that works, whether that comes from, again, personal experience or external research. Basically, it helps you as the author maintain integrity, in my opinion. It helps you have real understanding of what you're writing, and because you're ultimately writing on behalf of real people, taking real life scenarios and you're turning them into sometimes fantastical, sometimes just fictitious scenarios, but you are still writing on behalf of real people who you may never meet but might read your work. Like, preserve the relationship with the reader by showing at least that you've done your due diligence to consider them in your writing. What was the second part of the question? How do you balance accuracy with storytelling? Okay, so that I don't feel like that's a question I'm going to be able to answer, or even for myself fully now, because I'm still fairly early in my career. But I do think, I think a lot of that is up to judgment call. There are some cases where it's important for you to let the reader know, whether through the author's note or something similar, that you are aware of the inaccuracies, and that it's not meant to be a fully accurate depiction of whatever it is you're writing about. But again, I think it's a matter of judgment. As a writer, when you go to do your research, you're going to gain some knowledge and understanding of which pieces of whatever the subject is that you're writing about are most important. I think I would definitely try to maintain accuracy in those things, or at least, like, if not necessarily accuracy, at least consideration, and be able to express that in your writing. I can't tell you what that looks like for you. How do you handle feedback and criticism of your work, and how does it shape your writing process? Okay, so I'm actually in a very heavy feedback time right now. A manuscript that I've had for a few years is currently being beta read by different groups of people. I have a sensitivity reader, I have a focus group of the target demographic, which is a group of teenagers, and I have just another writer also reading it. We're doing a critique partner situation, and so I'm receiving a lot of feedback. And what I do personally is I always pray beforehand, that God would give me guidance, pieces of feedback to take, which pieces to not take, read through the feedback, and then as I'm going, I process it and I consider, okay, is this something that I agree with? Is this something that maintains the integrity of my story? Is this a change that is going to take away a desired effect from this scene? Because ultimately, as the author, I get to make that choice. Those are the things that are going through my head while I'm looking at feedback, and then I write down the things that I do want to keep, and then I go back later, and sometimes, like, I've had more time to process, and I'll say, okay, well, I don't actually think that this was necessary, that was just something that I was thinking in the moment. Or on the flip side, I'll remember something that I read in a feedback session, and then I'll say, you know what, actually, I think that might have been a good choice. Let's go ahead and make that change. So there's definitely a lot of like reprocessing of my work that goes into the writing process when I'm going through feedback. I think that really strengthens me as a writer, because it helps me remember why I wrote what I wrote in the first place and what the intent behind the story was, and because I have to think about if all of this feedback stays true to that. In summary, I'd say that I generally take feedback well, just with a judicious eye. Even if I don't take any or most of the feedback I receive, it makes me a stronger writer. That was fun. I really enjoyed that. I was not expecting Chat GPT to be that thoughtful and profound, but I hope that here hearing my answers to some of those questions helped you guys to learn a little bit more about the writing process, maybe get some advice that improves your writing. If you want more writing advice from me, I do post grammar tips and other pieces of writing advice on my socials, which are linked below. I'm on TikTok and Instagram. And if you want to hear more about my writing process, you can subscribe to my newsletter on the journey with Poe.Darcy, also linked in this video and in my bio. Thank you so much for watching. This was a really fun time. I love getting to share about my writing life and my writing journey with all of you. I will see you next time, friends.